What is the biggest plot twist you've seen in real life? Story 1. Was out with a friend of mine who ran into her dad and his other family. She saw him kiss the other woman, and the kid yelled "Daddy" while grabbing his leg. My friend yelled her father's name. He walked over and said, "We will discuss this later." He seemingly couldn't have cared less. It was a sobering moment of reality, to say the least. Story 2. Little town I grew up in had these two car dealerships on opposite sides of town. One Chevy, one Ford. They were bitter rivals. Attack ads, trash-talking salesmen, billboard wars, you name it. When the owner of the Chevy dealership died, it came out he'd also owned the Ford dealership by way of a shell company. No one saw that coming, including a lot of the higher-ups who worked at the dealerships. That sounds like the ultimate bored rich guy. Buy two car dealerships, have the managers talk trash about each other, and watch the fight. As the saying goes, any publicity is good publicity. Story 3. During the last year of my grandfather's life, he had dementia and was having trouble keeping track of reality. Before he was placed into hospice, he kept complaining about a man that was in his house. He would say that he would come out around at night and that he was taking his things and using his stuff. Grandma, of course, kept reassuring him that she was the only one there. His doctor increased his medications because he was losing touch with reality so badly. Fast forward to my grandfather's funeral, and a man showed up that wasn't known by more than a few people in the family. Turns out he was an old friend of my grandmother's who showed up to give his support. In a small town like that, it wasn't exactly an unusual thing to have random people show up to the funeral who knew the person at some point. Well, about a year later, my grandmother let slip that she is seeing someone, the guy from the funeral. At this point, nothing too odd. They got to talking at church and we thought it was sweet. Then a bit later, sweet innocent old grandma mentions that it's their 3rd anniversary. Grandpa died 2 years prior. This man was the person that Grandpa saw in his house every night. He was the reason that everyone thought Grandpa was going crazy. He was the reason that my grandfather was medicated to the point of being a vegetable for the last horrible year of his life. Too long didn't read. Grandpa thought he saw someone in his house before he died. Turns out, it was Grandma's boyfriend. Are you sure your grandma isn't dead? Because she is ice cold. Story 4. I graduated law and got engaged to the girl I had been with through university. We both applied for the same graduate program and ended up working in the same office in Canberra. 3 months before our wedding, I found out she was cheating on me with our mutual boss, and I broke it off with her. Long story short, it got really, really ugly, and the two of us ended up in a very bitter court case over property. Canberra is a pretty small city, and the legal world is pretty bloody small there. And everywhere I went, I bumped into my ex. It was beginning to seriously get me down, her too as it transpired. And I applied for an Australian government overseas development job in Tuvalu, a Pacific island with about 11,000 population. It's quite a prestigious job to get, with only 2 positions offered for a 2-year contract on a rotating basis. I was successful in the application and moved on island to start my posting, to discover that my ex was the other successful applicant. I spent the next 2 years sharing a tiny office on a tiny island with the person that I quite honestly loathed more than any other in the world. Story 5. My grandfather's funeral. He was always a fairly reserved and distant father as far as I understood. Would fit the stereotype of a northern dock worker who comes home expecting dinner to be on the table and then goes to the pub all night via the bookies. Anyway, an unsurprising heart attack later, we're all gathered for his funeral. We're a big but close family, so we know everyone, including his friends. However, one guy turns up, about the same age as my dad, and his siblings, who nobody knows. Long story short, turns out it was my grandfather's son, from another family, from another marriage, that went on for as long as his marriage to my grandmother. My grandfather had maintained 2 marriages over 40 years, having 7 children with my grandmother and just the one with this other woman. They knew about our family and kept away, and apparently my grandmother knew about them but kept quiet. Turns out he wasn't going to the pub every night. Story 6. I knew a woman who was going through divorce proceedings with her husband. He was always argumentative and borderline abusive towards her, certainly always shouting and demeaning. Then, just as the divorce was entering its final stages, he very suddenly died. His autopsy showed that he had a massive undiagnosed brain tumor which had been physically altering his personality. His wife felt all kinds of guilty afterwards and took it out on everyone she talked to and lost a lot of friends in the process. My wife's uncle is an incredibly nice guy who absolutely adores his wife. We started hearing about marital issues. He was becoming more and more argumentative, and then he hit her. They separated. He harassed her to the point that she got a restraining order. He defied the restraining order and was put in jail. In jail, his issues got him a medical evaluation. Turns out he had a brain tumor. They removed it. He returned to normal and was released from jail. They're back together with him back to his wife-adoring self. Story 7. The one guy I worked with was having a baby. He told me about his girlfriend. Yeah, she's pretty big, but she's amazing. She's the one for me. I didn't know him very well, but as he talked about the pregnancy and I gave him encouraging words and how his life was going to change so much, we bonded a bit. His baby was going to be born right before Christmas. He missed our work Christmas party because his baby was being born. We expect him to be gone for paternity leave, but he shows up a few days later. I feared the worst, that the baby had died. It turns out his girlfriend was lying about being pregnant to spend more time with him. I didn't think much of it at the time, but the fact that he brought up she was fat for no reason must have meant that she was so fat you couldn't tell whether she was pregnant or not. She showed him someone else's ultrasounds. They talked about what they would name their baby, how they'd handle taking care of it, all that stuff. I don't know what she thought was going to happen when 9 months passed and no baby. I guess it's good she came clean though. A more diabolical person would have faked the miscarriage or something. But that was seriously messed up. Shortly after, the dude left, so I don't really know how he handled it. What the heck? Story 8. 1991. I'm 19, just signed the lease for my first apartment, just got the first paycheck from my new job. I deposit the check at an ATM. Another first, I'd always gone into the bank to do it. 2 weeks later, I get my bank statement in the mail and see with horror, I have only $1.87 in my account. Way wrong, I should have at least $200. I'd been very careful with my spending. I'm freaked. I came within $2 of bouncing my first rent check. I'm literally reaching for the phone to call the bank when the phone rings. It's the police, asking if my ATM card was stolen. I check my wallet and the card is missing. My job at a theater pub came with cash tips, so I didn't use the card often. And tell them I was going to call them anyway because I was missing $200 from my account. Well, we got your card and your $200, so come down to the police station, they tell me. I can't figure out how they have my card and the cash. Doesn't make sense. I drive down there. Detective says someone, let's call him Bob, pulled in to use an ATM and saw a man acting suspiciously while he was using it, moving back and forth as if trying to dodge the camera. Bob says the man then left the ATM, got into a car, and drove away at high speeds as if fleeing. Bob then went to the ATM and put his card in, which popped out. Bob then withdrew $200 and then another ATM card popped out. My card. Bob's card had popped out because the crook had left my card in the ATM before speeding away. Bob realized he had withdrawn the money from my account and not his, so he brought my card and the cash to the police and reported the attempted theft. The detective gives me the description of the crook. According to Bob, it was a man, 5'7", brown hair, brown gold trimmed glasses. I say out loud, so about my height, my color hair, and glasses like mine? Before realizing Bob was describing me. I never deposited a check in an ATM before, so I was moving back and forth, following the instructions on the screen, filling out the envelope with my account number, punching the amount in, etc. I then forgot to take my card out and just left, because I'm an idiot. I drove away at high speeds because I was 19, and that's how I drove everywhere. Worried the detective might be annoyed, I didn't tell him I was a crook. I just thanked him and left with the money I stole for myself. Somewhere in a box in my closet, I still have the police report where I'm both the victim and the perp. Story 9. A few years ago, I got invited to a friend's engagement party. They were throwing a huge bash because they were planning on a very small destination wedding. Later in the evening, my friend's fiance takes the mic and starts thanking everyone for being there. Sorry, Jen will be out to thank you guys in a minute. She's just having a wardrobe malfunction. He goes on to tell the story about how they met, how they were best friends, and decided to get engaged and finished along the lines of, we wish you could all be there and that we could get married right now. So, we're going to. Out walks Jen in her wedding dress. Too long didn't read. Engagement party turned into a surprise wedding. Story 10. I used to call my tutor Mr. for the first 8 months of tutoring, just to find out she was a woman. Story 11. I was working for a summer camp some years ago. One Sunday, I was helping check campers in. One kid turns up with their dad. I look up, see this little boy, ask her name, Skylar blank. I find their name, but it says Junior Girls Village. I'm fairly sure that was a boy. I look up and can't decide. Unfortunately, the name doesn't help. I show my boss, the camp director, and she says, "So, do you know where you're going? Junior girls? Junior boys?" The dad promptly says, "Junior boys," as if the one kid who had a unisex name with long blonde hair, who was actually a boy, was somehow down as a girl in the system. I also checked in a kid whose surname was Dyson, and upon confirming it, found out his mom's maiden name was Broom. She upgraded. Story 12. I once had a job interview. It was very early in my career, and I was trying to move 500 miles to a new place. I built prototypes and brought samples of my work. It was a 9-hour drive, but everyone seemed so enthusiastic that I figured it was a lock. I did not get the job. I found another job in the area and I took it. 6 months later, they called and asked me to interview for the job above the one I had applied for. I was given an offer on the spot and worked there almost a decade. In the first few months, the people there told me the guy whose job I had, who would have been my boss if he hired me initially, had actually said the samples and work I did was beyond him, and he didn't want an employee who knew more than him. Well, I guess he doesn't have that problem since they fired him and replaced him with me. Story 13. My mom and a gal pal went to Mexico for break during college. They had a great time. While boarding the return flight, her friend says, "Sorry, I'm staying," and runs off. My mom hears from her a few weeks later after not being able to contact her at all. This was the 70s. Long distance calls and phones were scarce. Turns out her friend had been sneaking off at night and sleeping with the hotel gardener. She loves him and stayed in Mexico. That's all my mom knows. Hopefully, they lived happily ever after. Story 14. I was a Starbucks barista before the whole names on cup thing was big, or at least it wasn't really practiced in my store. There was this very cute guy who came in maybe 4 to 6 times a week. A little often, but nothing out of the ordinary. I flirted like mad. He flirted back. It was all great. Then he comes in with his fiancée. I was betrayed and treated him coldly from then on. A month later, 2 of him come in together, and I found out that they are twins, and I'd shot down any chance I had with a single one. Story 15. Worked at a small company summers during college. 2 dudes that worked there, Mike and John, are best friends since high school, and Mike is getting married to his high school sweetheart. 9 months after the wedding, the girl has a baby, and it looks nothing like Mike, but a lot like John. And she reveals that she had with John on her wedding day before she actually got married. She divorces Mike, marries John the next day, and Mike and John are not friends anymore. I can't believe she cheated on the exact same day as her wedding, not to mention with the best friend of the groom. Story 16. One of my good friends in high school started hanging out with this guy from the other public high school in our city, and before long, they were basically joined at the hip. She had a huge crush on him and was pretty sure he liked her too, but she'd never had a boyfriend before and was too shy to make the first move. One night, they were hanging out and he told her he had something huge to confess. He was gay. They remained close friends. Then a few months later at a party, the guy introduced all of us to his younger, by 1 year, brother. The dude and his brother looked similar, had similar personalities, and the exact same sense of humor. Fast forward 20 years, and my friend is happily married to the brother. Her best friend is her brother-in-law, and he and his husband are godfathers to her kids. Sometimes, the painful crush on the gay dude pays off. For those who feel bad for her husband for being second choice, or think she just substituted him for the guy she really wanted, here's the context you are missing. When she met her now husband, she was already pretty much over his brother. She became friends with her future hubs, and it wasn't until a year or more later that they started dating. after slowly developing feelings over time. Her crush on his brother was brief and adolescent, and she 100% loves her husband for who he is. Yes, the qualities the two brothers share in common were part of what made her develop feelings for both of them, but those are the qualities she finds attractive. Trust me, folks, there is no victim in this story. Everyone ended up happy and loved. Story 17. I was seeing a guy from Tinder for a couple months, but it fizzled out and we stopped talking. I was on Tinder again shortly after and matched with a girl, I'm bi, who told me to follow her on Insta. I noticed the Tinder guy also followed her, so I asked how she knows him. She hits me with, he was dating my best friend for ages, but they broke up a couple weeks ago because he was sleeping with some girl from Tinder. My response was, oh crap, and she managed to guess from that. I messaged the best friend as well to apologize, and she seemed really nice about it. Story 18. I work at a prison, and the lady flew all the way from Nigeria to visit her brother, who was supposed to be incarcerated at my unit. She speaks little English, but we try to explain to her that the inmate was not in the system anymore. He must have been released. We call a supervisor, and it turns out he was released over 5 months before. She walks away confused and comes back in with her husband, who speaks English much better. We tell him the scenario and he asks, well, where did he go? He doesn't have any friends or family in the US. We told him we don't know where he went. He was released. He could be anywhere. The guy, obviously confused, says, well, he couldn't have gone anywhere because he doesn't have any legs. So a legless Nigerian ex-felon with no ties is scooting around the US and no one knows where he is. Story 19. My esthetician was giving a Brazilian wax to a new client. New client goes on and on about this new guy she's dating and how he's a bartender at XYZ. Esthetician's boyfriend was the bartender. Always fun to find out you are knee-deep waxing the cat of the woman you are being cheated on with. True test of professionalism right there. Do I tear this cat up now or no, he'll do it later? Story 20. Studying abroad in England, I planned a weekend trip to Barcelona with this girl. This is pre-cell phones. I overslept. Got to the airport like 3 hours late. As soon as I arrive, there's a girl. At the exact same time, we both say, I am so sorry. Wait, what are you sorry for? Turns out she overslept too. British Airways changed our tickets for us, no charge, and we got to Barcelona a few hours late. I think the real plot twist is the fact that the airline didn't charge for switching the flights. Story 21. Was seeing a guy for a few months, and then he told me he didn't think he was ready for a serious relationship yet. Fair enough. Then, he posted about his new girlfriend 3 days later, and now they're expecting in November. Plot twist or dodge bullet? Story 22. My friend in college was such a jock. Worked out constantly, total womanizer, had posters of women in swimsuits. Also pretty conservative politically. Few years later, he's in a relationship with a black guy and also converted to Judaism. They adopted a baby girl from Korea. Story 23. When I was a sophomore in high school, we had a rash of thefts occurring during classes. It was a small school and we had no hall monitor or cameras in the halls. It went on for months until the gym teacher happened to catch the kid in the act of stealing from someone's backpack. There was a ruckus out in the halls and my class ran out to see what was going on. The thief was the principal's son. The gym teacher was holding him by the wrist and was telling everyone he just caught him stealing. The kid then pretended to pass out and he just fell to the floor while everyone rolled their eyes and went back to class. He was known for trying to get attention however he could. So cringy. Story 24. I was running late to catch a flight and hadn't checked in. Discovered when I reached the airport that I actually came to the wrong airport. Had to travel about 30 minutes to reach the other airport. Went to check in about 20 minutes before my flight. They didn't have any seats, so upgraded me to business class. Best flight of my life so far. Story 25. This isn't my proudest moment either, but whatever. I was 19 and I had just started a job at a new sushi restaurant. Well, the manager that was showing me around my first 5 days was young and pretty cute. She seemed flirtatious, but I wasn't trying to push or assume anything because I was a new hire. Well, after that week, She went on a vacation for a month to the Philippines, so I kind of forgot about her. Well, a month later, she returns and she is out drinking. So at 2:30 in the morning, I get a random call from her saying that she had been drinking and is now driving, which I hate, and she wanted to talk to someone. Anyway, after a lot of BS from her end, she ends up at my place because she needed to go to the bathroom, and I wanted her off the road. She ends up deciding she can't or shouldn't drive, and she wants to stay the night. So I set up the extra futon for her, because she's my manager and I ain't trying to cause no problems. Well, she decides that she sobered the F up when I turn out the lights, and she starts getting talkative and flirtatious. Things escalate, and I end up stopping it before we... At this point, it's 5 in the morning, and I ask her, "You good to drive?" She responds, "Yeah, I should probably get going. My husband is at home waiting for me." What the... Story 26. My sister's boyfriend decided that he wanted to do more with his architecture skills, so he gave his 2 weeks notice and moved to Haiti to help rebuild after the earthquake. They stayed together. He had bad phone service, so they mostly kept in touch through emails. He would send her long emails with photos and stories of what they were doing. This went on for a couple of months. One offhanded tip from a coworker and a week of sleuthing later, and it turns out he never went to Haiti. He moved to Seattle to be with his fiancée and partner of 9 years. Story 27. In primary school, we had a World War I memorial lesson, and we were asked if anyone had relatives who fought at the time. My friend brought in a picture of his great-great-grandfather with his wife. A girl also brought in a picture of her great-great-grandfather with his wife. The teacher said they looked similar. She put them side by side and looked shocked. We gathered around, and it was the same man who had kept his 2 wives a secret. Both had been married privately. They were cousins and didn't know. Story 28. A friend of mine. Apparently he was sneaking out for a trip outside the city with his friends since his parents didn't let him go. They were on motorbikes, already on their way outside of the city. Suddenly he got into an accident with another bike. It was his dad he crashed into. Story 29. Years ago, my company was slowly going under, so I was looking for other jobs. I got a job with another company, and I put in my 2 weeks notice with my manager. Me. I've been offered another job and I'm taking it. I'm putting in my notice. Manager. Oh, well, we hate to lose you. Do you mind me asking where you'll be going? Me. I'm going to company blank. Manager. Shoot. Me. ... Manager. I applied for that position too. Me. I'm sorry to tell you that you didn't get it. Story 30. This is my go-to answer for a lot of questions like this on Reddit, but it still blows my mind to this day. I was adopted from South America to the US when I was a toddler, and have no memory of my birth parents. I had an older friend / mentor I met in college. I knew him as Mike. When I learned that my birth mother had passed away, I got a few of her belongings, including some pictures. Who was in these pictures? Mike. He was my birth father. Story 31. Willie and Devin egged each other's houses. Devin also egged Tristan's house. Events that happened after, in order. Devin egged Willie a second time because Willie did it once. Willie called the cops on Devin, but nothing happened. Tristan keyed Devin's car. Devin egged Willie once more in retaliation and even punched him, thinking it was him. Willie called the cops again, and Devin got fined heavily. I heard he got arrested, but not sure about that. None of them actually egged each other the first time. It was me. I can't answer every question, but I'll throw in more details. I had 3 other accomplices. There were 4th and 5th egg victims named Isaac and John, but the former had no part in revenge, and John just went along with Devin. This happened around 2009 or 2010, way past the statute of limitations in my state now, when we were barely out of high school. Immature kids, whatever. Willie and Devin were notorious douchebags in our community, so we wanted to teach them a lesson. It helped a lot that Willie and Devin really hated each other already. Tristan was also kind of a D, but this incident taught him to be a better person. Tristan is one of my best friends now, and I actually confessed to him what I did. He found it funny and was still glad he had the adrenaline to key Devin's car. He kept quiet about it. Man, oh man, I thought I was gonna need a chart for this, but that twist came out of left field. You guys really came up with a savage scheme to get revenge on those bullies. Karma always comes around.